I'm back for part 3 of our discussion of young adult literature, and I'm just about to share with you my less than definitive list of characteristics of young adult literature. Please take this list with several grains of salt because, as we've seen, the young adult audience is a moving target. But here goes. First, the protagonist in a young adult book is at least usually 13 years old and is an outsider looking in. The main character is usually alienated in some way from the mainstream. Think about Huckleberry Finn, Joe March, Wart in Once and Future King, Matt in The House of the Scorpion, and as we'll see later in the class, even Laura in the last 4 Little House books. Now, this alienation may stem from a variety of things: a character's family situation, poverty, culture, education, hopes and dreams. Anything, in short, that sets the main character apart from his or her mainstream culture or the conventions of his or her society. When books written for adults feature adolescent main characters, these adult titles may also appeal to young adult readers: Catcher in the Rye, To Kill a Mockingbird, Gone with the Wind. As Molly Haskell points out in her book, Frankly, My Dear, adolescent girls everywhere and for a long time to come would see in Scarlet an emblem of rebellion against tradition and the hypocrisies of their elders. More about the whole rebellion concept in a minute. In general, YA readers like to read up. The main character usually appeals to readers if that character is just 2 to 3 years older than the reader. It's kind of the Peter Pan syndrome in reverse. Most young adults want to be older than they are, or at least they want to appear older. So the conflicts a slightly older character faces and solves appeals to them more. The same is generally true, I have to confess, for middle grade readers as well. A second major characteristic of young adult fiction: the story is told from a young person's distinctive point of view. That was what was so dynamic and dramatic about The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn when it was first published in the late 19th century. Huck told his own story in his own words. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. The book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth, mainly. There was things which he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. That is nothing. I never seen anybody but lied one time or another. Let's contrast the opening of Twain's 19th century young adult novel with a more contemporary one, and its memorable opening. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. And finally, one more YA opening, which seems to echo Huckleberry Finn in its own unique way. I am telling you this just the way it went, with all the details I remember as they were, and including the parts I'm not sure about. You know, when something happened, but you aren't convinced you understood it. Other people would maybe tell it different, but I was there. This is from Virginia Ewell-Wolf's young adult novel, Make Lemonade, which is told in first person, in blank verse. All 3 of these novels were written in first person. The main character of the novel relates the story, the unfolding action from his or her own unique and distinctive point of view, whether the narrator is reliable or not. Now, this characteristic doesn't mean that all young adult fiction is written in first person, but it certainly is a hallmark of the genre. The use of the first-person voice has become one of the most enduring characteristics of the young adult novel. But every rule exists to be broken, right? Take the Harry Potter books, for example. All the Harry Potter novels, for the most part, are written in third-person limited, as are all the Wilder books. Readers experience the action of the novel from Harry's point of view, though we're never actually in Harry's head. Let's take a look at this example. Harry moved in front of the tank and looked intently at the snake. He wouldn't have been surprised if it had died of boredom itself. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the glass, trying to disturb it all day long. It was worse than having a cupboard as a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia hammering on the door to wake you up. At least he got to visit the rest of the house. That said, however, Rowling continues to break a few point of view rules, even in the same novel. The opening chapter of the first book is written in third person omniscient. The author tells the reader things directly about the Dursleys that Harry himself could never have known. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Hedge were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you would expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they didn't hold with such nonsense. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. And in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Rowling shifts to third person limited, from a minor character's point of view, not from Harry's. Let's take a look at this example. It was Frank's bad leg that woke him. It was paining him worse than ever in his old age. He got up and limped downstairs into the kitchen with the idea of refilling his hot water bottle to ease the stiffness in his knees. Standing at the sink, filling the kettle, he looked up at the Riddle house and saw lights glimmering in its upper window. Frank knew at once what was going on. And as we'll see next week and beyond, Wilder herself sometimes shifted point of view away from third person limited in Laura's perspective to a different character altogether. Still, the bulk of the Harry Potter series and the Little House books focus on Harry and Laura, their thoughts, actions, and feelings. In the 5th book of the Harry Potter series, all of this is heightened. The same holds true in By the Shores of Silver Lake, where Wilder also heightens the emotions and feelings of Laura. Why does this happen? It's because in those books, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and By the Shores of Silver Lake, the main characters become teenagers. Harry turns 15 in Goblets of Fire, and Laura turns 13 in By the Shores of Silver Lake. They've become young adults. A third common characteristic of young adult fiction, the protagonist solves his or her own problems. This is important. The main characters, the young adults in these stories, must take active steps to solve problems, change the course of their lives, and resolve, or at least take steps to resolve, the main conflict within the novel. YA novels empower their characters, and by extension, their readers. Young adult main characters are independent and capable, free to succeed or make mistakes. In other words, young adult novels empower their characters and by extension, their readers. Main characters in young adult fiction should be independent, capable, free to succeed or make mistakes. That said, however, there's often an important older character who serves as a guide for the young adult protagonist. Dumbledore for Harry Potter, Merlin for Wart in Once and Future King, Marmee for Jo in Little Women, Jim for Huckleberry Finn, and Pa for Laura. These characters are usually older, wiser, more experienced, and more mature. But like the young adult protagonist, they stand outside the mainstream. They're in some ways rebels themselves, adults who perhaps in their hearts are still adolescents themselves, or keenly remember how it was to be 15 or 16 years old. A fourth characteristic of young adult fiction is that it is fast-paced, tightly written, and concentrated. Until J.K. Rowling and her Harry Potter series came along, Most American young adult novelists work within a 200 to 220 page limit on their manuscripts. That no longer applies, of course, thanks to J.K. Rowling. Going Bovine, a Prince Award winner, for example, came in at 480 pages. The first book in The Hunger Games is 374 pages long. But the writing is vivid, concrete, and the episodes are fast-paced. The story unfolds quickly, regardless of page count. Some scholars maintain that this approach to writing fiction for young adults is directly related to the television generation and the rise of computer games, videos, essentially the visualization of the United States. Others maintain that it relates to the short attention spans most young adults bring to the reading process. Frankly, I think young adults, by their very nature, won't put up with a lot of baloney from a writer. They don't like a lot of fancy writing stunts in their fiction. They see it a mile away. So that everything a writer puts into a YA title should be relevant, meaningful, and organic to the story. No fluff allowed. Could it be that young adult readers are simply more discriminating readers? As Ursula Le Guin pointed out, young readers don't consume plastic. A fifth characteristic of young adult fiction: these books deal with relevant adolescent themes. Main characters learn or struggle to acquire more mature social skills, find their sexual identity, accept their bodies and or the changes in them, achieve emotional independence from parents and or adults, prepare for sex, marriage, or parenthood, choose their occupations, develop a personal sense of morality, or become part of a larger community. As you read the remaining Little House books, think about these themes and how they could apply to Wilder's work. But in more specific and concrete applications, what does all this really mean in terms of subject matter for young adult fiction? Practically speaking, YA fiction deals with anything adult fiction can take on: sex and violence, rape and incest, divorce, homosexuality, racism and sexism, materialism, politics and corruption, death. I think this is why so many YA novels are controversial and the target of censorship. They deal with issues that make adults nervous and protective. Adults often want to protect young adults from these very issues, and yet they're the issues that interest young adult readers the most. I should point out, too, that from the late 20th century onward, young adult novelists began to deal with these topics much more graphically, much more directly. So that a novel that was published in 1941 for a young adult audience, dealing with themes that for the period were controversial, may seem very tame to us now. It's hard to imagine, for example, that the scene in These Happy Golden Years with Mrs. Brewster and the butcher knife would seem too edgy for today's young adult readers. We have to remember that this is an evolving category, and that audiences' tastes, perceptions, and interests change over time as society itself changes. This brings me to another key point. Young adult books, despite their grittiness and mature themes, rarely end in despair. Most young adult titles end with a glimmer of hope. Now, this doesn't mean that all young adult books have a happy ending. Novels such as The Once and Future King, which deals with the Arthurian legend, can't end with a happy ending and be true to the very nature of its source material. Most YA books end with the readers believing that characters will have the strength or insight to face the next challenges ahead and the next. For this reason, some YA writers strongly adhere to what I call the jagged ending. Characters may not live happily ever after. The novel may not completely resolve itself, but there's a sense of hope and continuing story, that readers have experienced just a slice of a character's life, that there's more to come. Going Bovine, for example, ends with the death of its main character. Let's read its final lines. She grins wide then. It's like the sky can't take any more and it explodes. All particles and partner particles and perhaps neutrons. Something new being born, a whole universe of yes and no and why the hell not. Sparks fly out past us, a zooming show of charged light that catches Dulcie's face in mid-laugh. And there's nothing to say but wow, wow. The same word backward and forward. Dulcie sighs in happiness. That's always my favorite part. And I see why. So there's still a hint of continuing story, a feeling that there may yet be another adventure into the unknown for Going Bovine's main character. Maybe death isn't the end after all. As writer Chris Van Allsburg points out, kids don't stop thinking about the books they read because they're not really over. And the best young adult books linger with readers. They think about them, remember them, even reread them. Why? Because the characters, situations, settings, and themes in YA books make readers think more broadly about their place in the world. Please don't mistake this for preaching or didacticism. I'm talking here about books that encourage young readers to think. These books don't tell their readers what to think, but they encourage them to examine, review, and consider new ideas, as well as old ones. Because once a novelist tells a young adult audience what to think, most adolescents are going to close the book and walk away. The best YA books give readers the freedom to make up their own minds. They don't patronize or condescend. Young adult books, however, can shape their readers' lives. This audience is impressionable. Teens read to gain understanding, insight, and new ideas. A single book can change a young reader's life and make her see the world differently. Perhaps that's why so many writers of YA fiction feel a huge responsibility to their craft and their readers. There is a reader-writer connection in this category that simply does not exist in sports journalism, movies, television, news, and documentary, and novels for older adults. Readers in middle school and high school have taken me to task for things that have happened to my characters. Their characters, they think, but always in the context of the work itself. Their minds were open to the story and to what they thought I was saying, whether or not they agreed. That's why writing for them is the most satisfying writing I do. The final books in Wilder's Little House series are all young adult novels, and they are especially satisfying. As you read these next 4 books, keep in mind what we've discussed today about the young adult category, readers, themes, and the general direction that writers are taking in this category today. And begin to think about why Wilder's work has endured, even as the young adult category has changed so dramatically. And finally, here, just in case you would like to compare the Little House books with today's contemporary young adult novels, is the listing of this year's Michael L. Prince Awards for 2015.